people. And so that means that if you support your community, if you put your community first, if you believe that Black people need to prioritize, please put a hashtag B1 in the chat. Hashtag B with the number 1 is our calling card. That means that we put ourselves first. That means we also understand that we are our number 1 priority, and also that we will be number 1 in the world one day when it comes to economic strength and intelligence. And also we must be one in order for us to win. Unity is important. Unify or die. Put a B1 in the chat if you agree with that philosophy. Hello, Kevin Goodwin. My name is Corey, Timothy Hunter, Nicole Thomas, Dr. Reed, Colonial Tech. I want to make sure I just thank all of you for joining us today and welcome you all to the platform. And so today we get to have a Powernomics Thursday. And you all know that the man that is, in my view, in many of your views, one of the greatest Black leaders of all time, one of the most effective scholars of any time, is Dr. Claude Anderson, who is the author of the books Powernomics, Black Labor, White Wealth, Dirty Little Secrets, the Black History Reader, et cetera, et cetera. So without further ado, I'd like to ask my friend, Dr. Anderson, how you doing today, sir?
Well, not too well. I'm in the highest level of festivity. I'm pissed off today. Let me be honest with you. I don't usually use those words in public, but today I'm so pissed off that I cannot fail to express my emotions to you when I first come on this morning. So okay. I'm at the highest level of festivity.
I've never heard the word festivity. So what I'm going to do is allow you to tell us why are you pissed off today, Dr. Anderson?
Well, simply because of some of the things I've read this morning and saw on the news today. And I'm pissed off with both with the Biden administration, conservatives in the country, but also with my own people. Because see, I told them for the last, for the last 30-something years, I told them to get away from the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and create your own Black International Independent Party and start voting strictly for yourselves. Resign from the Republican Party, resign from the Democratic Party, resign from the Libertarian Party, resign from the Freedom Now Party, and join a Black Independent National Party and vote strictly for your own selves, your own self-interest. Do not run into candidates, vote in a block nationally. You're 36% of the voting block. I say you can control politics in this country if you start voting as a block. And for anyone, regardless of color, black, white, pink, yellow, polka dot, or a black streak down their back, doesn't make any difference. Just vote for them based on their commitment. Those who promise the most and will deliver the most, simply straight to Black folk. Nothing else matters. I'm tired of telling Black people, forget the crap. Now you're back in the hole again. Democratic Party ain't gonna do a damn thing for Black folk. And then what? The Democratic Party was the people that originally enslaved you back in 1789. They held you in slavery until the 1860s. And now, for 10 years, you went with the Republican Party. You went with the Republican Party up until for only about 10 years. That was called Reconstruction. Said we want to go back and correct what the Democratic Party had did for 360 years. We're going to correct some of that bull. And so from 1865 up to about 1875, that was it. Republicans put out and gave this would give Black folks a chance. And within about another 30 or 40 years, so by 1865, 1870, the damn Democrats had taken over again. They got you again. And all they're going to do is practice what I call social liberalism, non-economic liberalism. You ain't going to get a damn thing from them. And here's in the paper today where Biden came out and says, in the papers, all over the paper now, said, I'm not going to support any reparations for Black folk. And then Harris has said that way before when she was running, that I'm not going to do anything specifically to help Black folk get into reparations. And I say to Black folk, what are you thinking about? They said, well, we listen to all these Blacks that come on the news every day and in the newspapers during an election and tell us we should go out and vote as a block for the Democratic Party. And they're going to take good care of us. I said, yeah, they're going to take care of you the same way they took care of you during slavery. And what you're going to represent the meek, the weaks, and the freaks. And that's the same thing you represented during slavery and Jim Crow semi-slavery. And they got you again. And now this was the only hope Black folks had during the election. And they didn't vote. They voted, they gave the Democratic Party about 95% of their vote. And now nobody wants to do a damn thing for them. And so we're in deep trouble. And so the Democrats came up with an agenda saying, once we get in office, here's what we're going to do for black folk. I said, what the hell is that? Well, we're gonna give them some. We're gonna give them just a big hunk of. We give them a great big hunk of non-economic socialism. And I said, what is it? Non-economic socialism and liberalism for black folk. And they said we're gonna give them some public housing. We're gonna double the income for unemployed workers. We're gonna give them some more money for education, and we're gonna give them some more money for welfare. We're gonna give them some more money and for prison reform. We're gonna give them some more money. I said, no, that's for everybody. What are you gonna do for black folk? They said, we ain't gonna do a damn thing for black folk. And so now the results coming out now again from the institution saying that right now that basically white folk are still anti-black. I told them when blacks came out of slavery back in 1865. Study says that at that time, 98%, Dr. Watkins, 98% of all the white people in America were opposed to freeing blacks from slavery, and secondly, from giving them any damn thing. That's why they didn't get 40 acres of the mule. They weren't gonna get a damn thing. All they do is set free with no money, no clothes, no education, no tools, no animals, no land, no resources, no religion, nothing, no guns, no weapons. And said, you go out there and root hall or die. And I looked up root hall or die back in the old days. That meant you're going to be like a hog, go out and dig for roots in the ground or just perish. And that's back to that. Black folk out of either root hall or die. And we're going to give them all this stuff. And I got all these blacks associated with Biden. I said, tell me right now, what is Biden going to do for black folk? He ain't going to do a damn thing. Same thing. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, telling black folk the same damn thing. And these white folk ain't gonna do a damn thing. The last study I saw says yes, back in 1998. I mean, back in 1898, and when blacks came out of slavery, 98% of the people against blacks. And now in 2021, guess what? It's gone down. The hate against black folk had dropped by 10 points. It went from 98, it's now down to 88. I said it took 150 years to reduce the hatred against black folk. I said, this rate, hell, white folk will be still hating black folk for another damn 3,000 years.
Everybody who's watching, speaking with Dr. Claude Anderson. Dr. Anderson is the author of the books Powernomics, Black Labor, White Wealth, Dirty Little Secrets, and the Black History Reader. Dirty Little Secrets has a 1 and 2 portion. You can take a look at a lot of his work at powernomics.com. And I mentioned to you all that if you are a believer in what Dr. Anderson says, don't just say you support it. Really support it. We got to learn economic maturity, putting our money where our mouth is. He has a library pack for $99 with all of his books. It should be required reading for all of our people. We are the public school system now. We are taking over the education of our people. We are not leaning on other people to educate us. We can do this ourselves. If you agree, if you understand, type yes in the chat. Give me a yes to let me know that we are on the same page in terms of understanding what how important this is for what we're trying to do. Now, Dr. Anderson, I had to mute a little bit. There was a little background noise, but I'm gonna ask you a question. Then I'm gonna unmute and I'm gonna mute myself. So, Dr. Anderson, this week, one of the things that was interesting about Joe Biden discussing reparations and Black Wall Street is that he talked about Tulsa. He talked about what happened in Tulsa. A lot of people were talking about it because it's the 100-year anniversary. He met with the survivors who are all over 100 years old. And there was a lot of conversation there. Now, my concern is that we're going to get caught up in the symbolism, that simply acknowledging what happened in Tulsa will be the same as doing what is necessary. When I see that with what happened with Tulsa, I see that as an example of what happened all across the country in hundreds of different cities. Also, I'm concerned that we're going to get so caught in the symbolism that we'll forget about the $15 trillion in reparations that are owed to Black people. So I'd like for you, I figured you were the perfect person to help educate us on that. And so, Dr. Anderson, if you could you tell us a little bit about maybe some of the things that we should know about not just Tulsa, but what happened all throughout the country over time in terms of these kinds of destructive events, and also how we need to view this and seize this opportunity to have a more important conversation?
Well, I'll be glad to do that. And just start off with a basic point. Basic point is that nothing has happened significantly for Black folk. You know why? Because see, Black folk are not in the system. They're outside of the system. They're outside and underneath it. That's why it's not going to happen for them. And because that's one of the things I talked about on page, let's say 64. If you were to open up Power Numbers, look to page 64, what I talked about on that page, it was that what I called the future would be based on what I call the boundary line. Why? Because you see what you call B.W. Du Bois has talked about that in the 20th century, the issue would be the color line. I said that is over. That's starting in the 21st century. What you're in now is going to be the boundary line. Everything will get confused because nobody's abiding by anything anymore. Everybody, where we used to be where during slavery, blacks were the meeks, the weaks, and the freaks. Now everybody wants to give a pretense that they're equal to Black folk by saying we're also part of the meeks and weaks and the freaks, and we've been misused and abused. Now let's go back to get to your point. So let's go back. You asked about Tulsa. See, first of all, Tulsa was not the original Wall Street. And you got all these Black folks sit up in colleges, and that's the worst people to be asking about anything about right now. Most of them just go read a book. Next, they go out and get in front of a bunch of students to try to show how erudite they are. And most of them know what they're talking about. That's why I just got through seeing on the news. Here's a woman who do like most of them do, particularly the college professors. Any book thing I put in my book, they'll go out and cherry pick it out of there and try to and say, well, I teach for college, so I'm on a manifold that says that I must either publish or perish. And I'm gonna go pick up Dr. Anderson's books, and I'm gonna pick 2 or 3 or 4 lines out of there and write me a book. And so she's got out a book now I got a book on the Second Amendment. Hell, I've been teaching that now for 30-something damn years, and that's all in my books. And there she's almost word for word talking about that we have to understand the Second Amendment. Anybody had my books already understand that. The next one got up, well, Jim Crow, segregation, that's a second type of slavery. That's re-enslavement. Everybody should have known that by now. So let's go back to my point I want to get to. I keep deviating. But you talk about Tulsa. Tulsa was not the original first Wall Street in America. And it wasn't really Tulsa then. It was really Greenwood, right? That adjoins and abuts Wall Street. Tulsa. The real Wall Street was down in North Carolina. That was down in Durham, North Carolina. See, blacks in Durham, North Carolina was more advanced than any blacks in the country. Any blacks that got more than a 3rd grade education say, well, how would Tulsa jump that far ahead and become so sophisticated economically way out in the damn wilderness, way out in Oklahoma, some damn place, in Kansas and all that? How'd they get so advanced? Because the real Wall Street was in Durham, North Carolina, and that one got wiped out. And they are the ones that had started all the insurance companies, and they had the banking systems down there, and they had their own bus lines and cab companies. And North Carolina was very sophisticated. That's where that came from. And so what whites have always destroyed anything that would put Black folk in a position to be competitive with them. That is the nature of walls. That's the nature of racism. I've told blacks all of my life now, since I was 21 years of age, what racism was. They still want to try to define racism by how white folks define racism. What whites say, racism is whether or not you like somebody or you're mean to them. And that's what racism is. That's a lie. Racism is an economic issue. It's a group-based economic issue where groups are competing to own and control resources, wealth, and power. That's what racism is. That came up in 1859 on the eve of the Civil War. And a few blacks have been profiting like Durham, and they said, we're going to get rid of that. We're going to get rid of Tulsa. And they went out and killed about 600 people in Tulsa and burned the whole damn city down. But it was not only the Broad Society, but also the little air aviation out there, almost like a National Guard. They also they dropped the bombs on the houses and burnt down the churches and buildings and everything. They did that there, but that's not the only place. They also burned down Wilmington, North Carolina, where blacks were doing extremely well up in Wilmington, North Carolina. They burned out Wilmington. And then after they got to burn out Wilmington, then they went over and burned out a couple of places in Nashville where Black folk had big, broad communities, doing extremely well, and had their own businesses and their own communities. And why I say communities? Because you see, whites have never never wanted black folk to have communities. What they wanted to do was be isolated and be disorganized so they can come in and whites can come in anytime they want them. It started off originally way back in colonial days. They were called maroon towns, and black folk would get away from white folk, go way out in the woods, way up in the mountains, any place, and build their own little communities and maroon towns. And whites would always go out for maroon hunting. Once or twice a year, they go out there looking for them and try to find where they are in the hills. And as soon as they find them, you know what they would do? They would kill them and burn them out. That was true all through history, whites. And so to make a long story short in that regard, this is very important for you to understand, particularly with the Congress, is that up until let me get the right date for you, until about 1940, up to about 1948, the late 1940s, that out of all the riots in America, of all the burnings and destruction of cities in America, black folk had never burned down a city or town, never burnt down a white neighborhood, never burnt down a white community, have never. Only person been doing that is whites. Whites have been burning down towns now ever since the founding of slavery. And black folk don't know that. They let every time there's a disorder in a city, they say, all you black folk like to do is just burn down things at whites' home. Yes, because that's what you've been doing. They learned it from you. And there's never been one damn place in this nation where black folk have initiated and conducted a riot or a major disorder and burned down the town. But as I said, I just named a few: Durham, Wilmington, Greenwood, and then in Nashville. Then they went within after, and also about 1921s and the early 1920s, they went to New York and burned down a whole big neighborhoods in New York and hung black folk from the telephone post. They killed off about 400 or 500 blacks up there. Then they did the same thing in Chicago. And then after they went that by 1923, they went down to Rosewood. Rosewood was down south of Florida, in South Florida. They went down there because a white woman again claimed that she had been raped by a black man. And they went down there, the whites stormed down there because they knew black folk were disarmed, because they're always telling black folk, y'all shouldn't have any weapons. And that's what the black codes were about, and segregation, saying the only thing black folk could have was a rifle for hunting. They could not carry pistols and other weapons. And so they went down to Rosewood and they hung about 200 blacks down in the Rosewood and killed them off and ran most of them into the swamps. Then they finally chased them out and killed all those, and about a few survived that for Rosewood. But black folk now have been running from white folks, and white folks have been raiding, burning down black towns and black communities way beyond Tulsa. Tulsa was just one. So if you're going to start talking about reparations, don't start telling me about reparations for Tulsa. What are you talking about? Some form of symbolism. Well, we're going to go out and make it symbolic. We'll go out and have a march. We'll have a demonstration. We'll have a parade. We'll have bands playing. And by now it's too late. You know why? Because in Tulsa right now, or Greenwood, probably most of the damn land and buildings now belong to whites. What are you going to do? And then go and put up a bunch of money to further enrich them? That's ain't going to help black folk. I don't ever see anybody saying this program is strictly and solely for black people to take up for all the wealth and all the pain, all the suffering, or for lack of fact that we gave out over 2 billion acres of free land to European whites who were coming to this country to freeload. They came here specifically to get enrichment. And we gave them 2 billion acres of free land, but we would not give blacks 40 acres and a mule. And so now, but anytime there's a race riot or disturbance, they burn out something, they bring in whites. That's why Trump passed what's called an Opportunity Act right now up in New York, to what used to be Old Harlem. So now Old Harlem, that used to be all black in New York, that's being gentrified with Asians, Arabs, and Hispanics, and whites taking it over. Blacks don't own a damn thing, more than about 1/2 or 1% in the entire country. And all they go for is symbolism and ceremonies, where somebody always wants them to get out and march and walk. And I'm sick and tired of seeing black folk think that somehow that's being good. That shows that we are kind people, that we are compassionate people, that we are acquiescing people, that we are friendly to other groups coming into the country. Other groups see black folk as being stupid. That you're the only people that won't compete. You don't demand a damn thing. Every time you put people in power or in a position of authorship, you never ask for a damn thing. Now, after being in two presidential elections like Carter, where I was a campaign manager, or or being the campaign advisor up in Maryland for Clinton. Guess what? See, Clinton said after about 2 or 3 years, I'm just surprised. Black folk ain't never demanded anything from me. All they want from me is to hire 1 or 2 persons here and there, and to come to an NAACP luncheon or dinner and buy a few tables, tickets. Blacks don't demand anything. And right now, Biden ain't gonna do a damn thing for them. I told them over and over again, and I'm not making this point anymore because I'm gonna cut that out soon. You had a chance to build a black high-speed rail system right now, going from almost the border of South Carolina all the way across those 4 black cities, towns, or states called the Cotton Belt, going all the way out west. And already right now, Biden has made a commitment to give almost all that infrastructure money to Amtrak. Amtrak can get all that money. That's the old rich white family guards gonna get all that money. They're gonna tell black folks, look, they're gonna help you out. They're gonna get some new seating on there so you can sit down in soft seats again. But it's not gonna be owned by you. Ain't a damn thing gonna be owned by you all. So I'm pissed. That's what I'm pissed about, all these things. Black folk don't understand, and what they think other people see as being friendly and kind and generous and compromising and acquiescing. Other groups, Arabs, Asians, Hispanics, they see that as being stupid, that you're stupid people. We can come into your neighborhood anytime we want and put up a business because nobody's going to give you anything. And most of the programs right now that Biden is going to put money into is going to the Hispanics. Hispanics are nothing but whites speaking Spanish. Arabs are, again, or whites practicing Islam and got their own religion and speaking the language.
All right.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. You make a great point. And everybody, I want you to know we're talking to Dr. Claude Anderson. He's the author of the books Powernomics, Black Labor, White Wealth, The Black History Reader, and Dirty Little Secrets. His website is powernomics.com. All of his books are on their website. I encourage you to go there. Also, theblackbusinessschool.com. We have specialists right here on the line that can help you if your goal is to learn how to start a business. You can get started for free. You don't have to come in with anything. Feel free to just talk to somebody on our team, and we can help you. We're educating millions of people all around the world, and we'd love to help you too, because we believe in ownership, and we believe in Black ownership. This isn't just about making money. It's about you actually having power. And so do me a favor, if you could, we're building this into a media outlet. We really need your help. We need Black-owned media. So whatever platform you're on, please subscribe. Some of you are watching on Financial Juneteenth TV. That is a financial channel that we own. We would love for you to be a part of that. So if you could hit the subscribe button and or hit the thumbs up button right now, thumbs up, and then put a B1 in the chat after you hit the thumbs up button to let us know we're on the same page. So Dr. Anderson, I'm going to ask you a question now about Biden and this conversation about Black Wall Street. I think a lot of people were surprised that it was addressed. Remember, it took 100 years to get to even this point. You know, he sat down with some of the survivors who, unfortunately, they're over 100 years old. I guess he had to address it because it's the 100-year anniversary. But, the thing is that, when Biden or anybody in the administration is having conversations about Black history or reparations or Black Wall Street, they don't talk to people like you. The community, millions of people in the community know that someone like yourself knows this stuff like the back of his hand. You know where the bodies are buried. You know all the information that people need to have. So in your words, why do you think that they are hesitant to speak to someone like yourself, even though you're right down the street, right in D.C.? They could easily pick up the phone, call you, bring you in for a congressional hearing and hear the whole story. Why do you think they're hesitant to do that?
Well, for a simple fact that white folks basically are homicidal and not suicidal. Why would they want to bring me in there? They know I would give Black folks, supply Black folk with the history of all the issues and also solutions for how to better improve themselves and the quality of life so they can enrich themselves, enrich their communities, and enrich other Black folk. They don't want to do that. The first thing I would say when I see Blacks, they talk, well, what we're going to have, let's have a study of whether or not we should have reparations for Black folk. Hell, you didn't have studies for all the other people you gave reparations to. That is an insult. Why do Black folks sit there and let people insult them and not do a damn thing for them? See, they didn't study all the white folks in the South after the Civil War was over. When they set up the Freedmen Bank for Black folk, they put money and resources in there, saying the Freedmen Bank in the 1860s should have been taking care of Black folk. But they switched it off, and guess what? And gave all the land that white folk in the South had lost on those plantations. They got all them billions of acres of free land in the South, all through and all across the country and out west. They didn't do a study saying let's have a 7-year study to see whether or not they're entitled to some reparations since they lost the war. No, they gave them back all the darn land. Then turned around and created a law called the Black Codes and all that, saying now we'll even give you back to Black people. We'll reparate you all by not only giving you back all the land that you lost during the Civil War, we'll give you back all the blacks that you lost during the Civil War. And for Black women and for white women said, well, you know, we can help y'all keep these blacks in a hold in the late 1900s, about 1918. Said, you know, because right now Black folk are coming back from World War I in Europe, and those blacks will come back and they're concerned about getting more opportunities and privileges and rights in the economics. And we could help you all if you all give us the right to vote. And so white man went in and passed Amendment 19 to give white women a right to vote if they didn't own land. But white women have always had the right to vote, but they had to own land, had to have land in their name. And so that's why they passed Amendment 19. Nobody ever tells you that we women want the right to vote. Hell, you always had the right to vote. And the man that was owned everything that you were sleeping with and going to bed with, having babies for and cooking for, he owned every damn thing. You co-owned it, co-controlled it, co-influenced it, and inherited 100% of it. And she got reparations. Nobody did a study after World War II. After we had World War II with Europe, with the Germans, and at the end of the war, we gave reparations to call the Marshall Plan across Europe with billions of dollars. Nobody did a study, Dr. Watkins, and now Black folk talking about, well, we got to approve House Bill 40. We approved that in the House of Representatives. We might not be able to get it through the Senate, so we have to take a little while and slow it down and try to figure out how we can get it through. And this is now House Bill 4. That's an insult and a shame, even me talking about it. Set up a study of seven member, 3 representatives from the House, 3 from the Senate, and 1 from the damn White House to study whether or not blacks should get reparations. That is an insult. I see blacks all over the country, including some of the blacks in Congress, saying we should support House Bill 40. And so that we can get some reparations, but they're going to study it for about 7 or 8 years. Now, I got 6 damn college degrees, okay, in social economics, and I worked and earned those stuff. I've been studying economics and black racial issues for 40 or 50 years. Nobody asked me to do a damn study. So why in the world they got to study reparations for black folk? And then they also in World War II, here comes the Japanese. They bombed Japanese and dropped the damn atomic bombs on 2 or 3 cities. And guess what? They say we're going to give reparations to Japanese. Nobody said, but we don't need to do a study because we just bombed the hell out of them. And so they gave them, it was called the Point 4 program, gave Japan like $6 billion to repair Japan. And then nobody did a study. Nobody had to study that. And they gave reparations also to Cubans after they took over Cuba and Puerto Rico. Nobody studied that. Everybody's gotten reparations except black people. But every time you start talking about giving black folk some money, some economics for the pain and suffering and the damage and economic and educational inflictions you put on them, you always got to have a damn study. That is an insult. I wish a white person would come to me and ask you, what do you think about a damn study? After you go study your mama, don't come to me, ask me about a study. Don't need no study, know what you've been doing to black folk now for 465 years. You've inflicted pain and suffering on, and every 24 hours, and you know it. But they said, well, but we know black folk, we can easily put them off by telling them we'll study it. And then after 7 years, we said we were against it. And so we would have saved 7 years of paying them some money and all that kind of stuff. No, you tell them that when you destroyed Tulsa and you destroyed Roseland, you destroyed Nashville, you destroyed
you mentioned
North Carolina.
I just so you know, Dr. Ensign, I took a note on your list. You made a list. You said Durham, Wilmington, Greenwood, Nashville, New York, Chicago, Rosewood. And those are just the first few that you named, but there's, I'm sure, many others. I just want to help you on that list. Go ahead, please continue.
I can probably, if I had time, I could probably figure out how to sit somewhere and do a lot of thinking. There were over 300 places. I'm not including the maroon towns they burned out. Maroon town where black folk had built structures Or now last week, everybody was celebrating. Let's celebrate the Arlington Cemetery, because this is gonna be the day for that's a special day to remember those who gave their lives for the country, and we'll call it Memorial Day. That was not a Memorial Day. What they wiped out over there used to be a black called Freedom Village. That's what that was over there. It was called Freedom Village, and that was called Flag Day. Things they were doing for black folks to bury the soldiers who were killed in the Civil War. The Union soldiers, they had a cemetery over there, belonged to black folk in a black town. They wiped out Wall Street. Wall Street used to be a black community up in New York. They wiped that out. And now they put a big economic center up there called Wall Street. Every time they wipe black folk out and kill black folk, they said, what we're going to need to do is do a study and give something that will just be symbolic and ceremonious. Now, we wiped out Floyd, and by almost breaking his neck and suffocating him to death. Now, and a year ago, and now what should we do? Well, let's come up with a law that says we shouldn't do that anymore. That's what we should do. Boys, and you won't know why I'm pissed to the highest level of festivity. But that's what I can go on and on all day. But I'm not gonna monopolize your problem, your program today. But never in the history of this nation has one politician, not one white nor one black, has ever done anything specifically and solely to address in monetary, economic terms the suffering and economic depredation of black folk. Not one. And that's why every president was a slave owner. Up to the first 18 were slave owners. And they keep talking, well, we're gonna get some economic justice. Quit talking about justice. You can't get into justice in the United States. When you got 8 whites sitting on the United States Supreme Court, and the 9th white is a black man, a white man pretending to be white sitting on the Supreme Court. How are you gonna get economic justice when almost 99% of all the federal judges were racist? And here's the end of it. And see, I always like to tell people what they should do. If you're going to understand all this stuff, whether you're talking about Tulsa or all these other places, you have to understand the whole nature of the Federalist Society and the Federalist papers that were passed at the same identical time that the Constitution. See all these people now talking about democracy. Well, Anderson, we get our democracy at risk. You never had a damn democracy. This country has never had a democracy. Never had it. They had a republic that was pretending to be a democracy. Because see, that's why the Federalist paper was submitted in 1789 in Philadelphia. Go back to 1776, if you want to get the whole thing. Go back to 1776 when they came together to try to develop a constitution. And the Federalist paper was put in. The Federalist paper says basically that if you're going to try to build a democracy, it is the majority society's responsibility to take care. If you're going to set up a minority, you can't have a society that says the majority will win and rule and the minority will lose and suffer. And expect people to go for that bull. And says, therefore, you got to say that if you're going to have a democracy where the majority will win and rule, then here's what you cannot do. You can take a specific group of people and target them for being the minorities, and then deny them the opportunity to become the majority by continuously bringing in and feeding the majority to increase them so that the one group that is a minority will always remain a minority. So when they set up the Constitution back in 1789, blacks were the official minority. And since that time, blacks has remained a minority now for 465 years. You know why? Because this nation's immigration policies, they keep bringing people in and bringing them and register in Washington, classify them as being whites. If they got any drop of white blood in them, they're classified as whites. And that's why I got silly blacks in different colleges saying, one day we black folk gonna take over. You ain't gonna take over a damn thing. White folk keep changing the damn terms. So white folk will always be the majority and you will never win. And that's what the Federalist paper says. The Federalist paper says this, that if you set up a democracy where a minority will always lose and always remain a minority, then that minority doesn't have any responsibility. They have no responsibility. They have no responsibility or obligation to do anything that you decide to do. And listen to what I'm telling you. This is the Federalist paper now that was approved at the same time the United States Constitution was approved. that says if you in fact set up a democracy in the United States, and you say that the majority will win and rule, and the minority will lose and suffer, and you said we got these slaves coming in, they're going to be a minority. You cannot keep bringing in whites over them, and whether they are European whites, Asian whites, or Muslim whites, or Hispanic whites. 70% of whites, Hispanics were whites until 1970. Now they are coming in over the black, and that's what Biden's going to respond to. It's what Hispanics want. Hispanics now have increased by 5,600% just since 1960. And blacks only increased by 300, and Hispanics have increased by 5,600%. That's almost 7,000% in their population just since 2000. And that's why black vote. Now Hispanics are the rulers over blacks. Now blacks were used to be the number two citizen in the country. They are now number 3. And now the Arabs and the Muslims are going to get together. And in less than 30 years, they're going to combine their groups. And guess what? They're now going to push black folk into being 4th-class citizens. They're going to say, you blacks were 2nd-class citizens for 465 years. Hispanics make you 3rd-class citizens. And now Arabs and Asians are going to get together and make you 4th-class citizens. So anybody with an IQ over 10 should say, well, if we didn't get a damn thing when we were 2nd-class citizens for 465 years, what are we going to get when we become 4th-class citizens? You ain't going to get a damn thing but the same thing you got. To answer your first question, you're going to get the same thing you've always gotten because you're outside and beneath the system. Nobody's speaking up for you. You can go right. If you want to count the number of blacks in this country, nationally has national visibility, that is sticking up and fighting for blacks' exceptionality and the things that they're entitled to. They're entitled to reparations, appreciation, recognition, and reparations. Find me one in the country that's standing up with national visibility saying, right now, this country is not going any further until they provide recognition, appreciation, and reparations to black folk in this country. Find me one. Find me one. And if you try to raise your fingers, I bet you'll be lucky to get one finger on your hand. If you get 2, you can put all those in a cab.
Well, everybody, if you're listening, if you just got here, I'm speaking with Dr. Claude Anderson. Dr. Anderson is the author of the books Powernomics, Black Labor, White Wealth, The Black History Reader, and Dirty Little Secrets 1 and 2. His website, where all his books can be found, which are required reading for our community. This is required reading. This is something that all of our children must be aware of. You can go